The line had slowly come to a halt. Stretching around the inside of the church were hundreds of people who had come to this holy place of worship to pay their respects to the life of a 16-year-old young man. Outside on the street corner, this cold, crisp autumn day in Chicago, were a group of Muslims from the nation conversing about the deteriorating conditions in the south side of this windy city. Inside this old, run-down, yet beautiful cathedral, I sat 10 rows back, watching old people, young people, families, wheelchair-bound seniors, crying babies come and go. Stop for a moment, some would cross themselves, and others were unable to even look. But all at some point moved on. But then the line stopped. Someone wasn't able to move on. Someone wasn't aware there are hundreds of people in line behind her. Someone didn't care about the Muslims taking their positions for the arrival of the minister. Someone needed time, and no one said a word. We all just watched. We watched this precious, beautiful 8-year-old angel stand over her cousin's open casket and hug him like she may never see him again. We watched this child gently touch and caress the face of another child, yet one was living and the other had passed on. We watched her father dressed in a black t-shirt with a Jesus piece gold medallion chain around his neck stand next to her, standing and staring at the ceiling in utter pain, but clutching his precious angel by his side. We all just sat and watched and pretended as if we weren't in the room. So this child who walks with God could have her one last moment with her hero. She kissed him on the forehead and she clutched her daddy as tight as she knew how and slowly walked down the aisle with tears streaming down her swollen face. I turned to witness her powerful exit. The young man's entire family was standing at the front doors of this congressional hall of God, awaiting their entrance. We rose to our feet. And with deep respect for the pain and suffering, we stood motionless as they walked down the center aisle, led by some of the most powerful men and women of faith in our land. And now, as the mother of this 16-year-old young man had told me on the phone on Wednesday, she could put her baby to rest. These were words that I wrote after attending the funeral of this young man, this 16-year-old man. I was sent a video, and this image from the video was the image, the last moment before this 16-year-old man saw the end of his life. And I sent the video, and I was asked by the family if I could help bring some dignity to the death of their child so their child would not die in vain. As my newly appointed position as editor-in-chief of Global Grind, a website that Russell Simmons had founded, they asked if we would put up a story on the death of their child. And it reminded me of a conversation that I had with a friend, the mayor of Newark, Cory Booker, about what happens when black children die, what happens when brown children die, and what happens when white children die. And far too often, we remember the names of the white kids, but the black children are numbers in the newspapers. Homicide 372 of the year, or black teen, or black boy, or black or teen, and for white children, and this is no disrespect to the pain of their families, but their names become part of our everyday vocabulary. This beautiful girl, Natalie Holloway, was killed almost a decade ago. This young child, John Benet Ramsey, killed almost 2 decades ago. For those New Yorkers in the room, this young man, Etan Paltz, was killed over 3 decades ago. And just last year, his face was on the cover of our newspapers. And so I thought, who here is currently on Twitter? Who here was on Twitter in 2012? Who here was on Twitter in 2011, 2010, 2009, 2008? The inventor of Twitter is here. And so, thank you for having us. At this time in social media, Twitter was new. As you can see, there weren't a lot of folks in 2009, but we thought maybe, just maybe, we could get this young man's name to trend. And so we created a hashtag, very simple. He has a name, Darion Albert. And there he is, 16-year-old Darion Albert. And we created this hashtag, he has a name, and in 6 hours it trended. And it was there, right there on Twitter, he has a name, Darion Albert. And on Wednesday, the White House calls and says, what do we do? And I said, you send him to Chicago. It's 2009. And instead they sent Secretary Arne Duncan, the Secretary of Education, and they sent the Attorney General, Eric Holder, to Chicago. And I sat there in the pews of this church on Saturday afternoon with 3,000 people, Minister Farrakhan and Father Flagler and Minister Jackson and Reverend Sharpton. And I watched this young girl say her goodbye, and I got on the plane, and when I got home to New York, I got a message on my voicemail. And the message said, would you come to Queens tomorrow on Sunday and sit with Donna Hood in her home, in her living room? And I did. And I grieved with the mother of a 13-year-old child who was shot with one bullet to the back of his head, a block away. He has a name, Kevin Miller. And then I ended up in Detroit. And I sat in the church in Detroit of this beautiful young lady, Ayanna Jones, who was sleeping in her home with her grandmother, and the police came in, and it was supposed to be the house upstairs, and they went to the house downstairs, and they busted in the door with the TV cameras following her, and they kicked the door, and grandma stood up and said, no, and they shot. And they put a bullet in her head, and she died. And we kept, over the years and the months, we kept doing, he has a name, and she has a name, and he has a name, and she has a name, and he has a name, and over 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 and over. Heaven Sutton from Chicago. And on February 26, 2012, this young man was killed. And Jasiri, my good dear friend, your words are so beautiful. And this young man was killed, and we ran a story. He has a name, Trayvon Martin. And we thought it was just another one of these series that we do on Global Grind of another young black man who was killed. And can we just at least give this family some peace of mind? Their child at least will remember their name. But you know, this time felt a little bit different. This time felt like there was something wrong. There wasn't an arrest. It didn't feel right. And everyone was talking about this. But yet the family, Sabrina Fulton and Tracy Martin, the parents of this child, were just fighting for justice for their son. And we on the outside were just trying to get in the game and have a conversation and get this man arrested. And the conversation was much deeper than we had had before. And I wrote an article saying, dear white people, you will never look suspicious like Trayvon Martin. So I felt as a white person, I wanted to get in the game, and this is how I got in the game. And this conversation is about race and what you could wear and hoodies and what as a white person I could wear with a hoodie and not be stopped. And this notion of the talk that so many parents in this room have had with their children, but I never had that talk. And perception of young black men. But what was happening with the parents is they were fighting for dignity, and that was what he has a name and she has a name was all about. They have families. They have parents. He has a brother. He has a grandmother and a grandfather. And for the first time, what felt different in this horrific tragedy, for the first time what felt different was that there was some humanity to his death. It wasn't just a number in a newspaper. It wasn't just a statistic in a police log. And so, when this young man was killed, Jordan Davis, he wasn't just a young man who was killed because he turned the music up too loud. He was a young man who was a child of Ron Davis and Lucy McBath. And Lucy is with us this evening. And Lucy, I want you to know that we know your son, and we love your son, and we are not going to stop fighting for your son. And this time felt different. And then, in the State of the Union address, the President of the United States of America invited the two people on the left to sit next to the First Lady of the United States and recognized that their pain, their suffering, just 8 days after she participated in the president's inauguration, Hadiyah Pendleton was shot and killed with a bullet to the back, and the president on national television, every network on television, recognized that their pain and their suffering is equal to the pain and suffering of any American family. That's right. Because these children, Lucy's child, Sabrina's child, Hadiyah's mother's child, Hadiyah's their child, they're our children. And so, if we can just do the least, at least let us remember their names. That's the least we can do. But in the memory of Hadiyah and Jordan and Trayvon and Darion and Ayanna and Heaven and Ramarley and Oscar, in the memory of these American children, let us fight with every ounce of energy we have. Let us scrape with every tooth and nail that is in our body. Let us fight not just for their humanity and their dignity in their death, but let us fight for every child's humanity and dignity in their life. Thank you so much.